I will tell you something about wolves before I tell you about Lyra. A wolf does not choose for politics. A wolf does not choose because the council recommends it, or because the bloodline is clean, or because the alliance is favorable. A wolf chooses because something in its chest goes quiet in a way it has never gone quiet before, and it follows that quiet the way water follows a slope, without argument, without embarrassment, without the faintest interest in your opinion on the matter. I have known this about wolves for 20 years. Dane taught me. Was my wolf. Enormous, gray as ironstone, 22 years old, and still the heaviest presence in any room he entered. He had not left my side in 2 decades. Not in council, not in the field, not in the small hours when I sat alone with the maps and the tallies and the weight of a kingdom that refused to be simple. Wherever I was, Dane was at my left knee, and the world arranged itself around that fact. I am telling you this so you understand what it meant when he got up and followed her. The open petition season at Thornwall runs for 9 days at the close of autumn. Any soul may enter the gates. Any soul may speak. Any soul may go. It is the oldest tradition in the kingdom, older than my family's name on the throne, and I have kept it because it works. Because the kingdom is healthier when its people can walk through my gates and say what they need to say to my face and walk out again with an answer. My counsel finds it exhausting. I find my counsel's exhaustion instructive. She arrived on the 3rd morning. I was in the petition hall when she came in, a long room, stone-floored, with benches along both walls and a dais at the far end where I sit. Not a throne, a chair. There is a difference, and it matters. She's perhaps the 14th petitioner of the morning, a woman in a cloth-dyer's apron, indigo still faint on the backs of her hands, a traveling pack worn smooth at the straps. She sat where the others sat. She waited where the others waited. When her turn came, she stood and stated her business without preamble. There was a child in the village of Eckfeld, she said. A boy 7 years old, with a lung condition that kept him indoors through winter. The village had applied twice to the kingdom's healer's registry for a winter placement and been turned away on a technicality. The village was 2 leagues outside the registry's mapped boundary. She was not from Eckfeld. She had simply stopped there on her route and met the boy and found the situation unjust. She was asking me to review the boundary. That was all. No flourish, no appeal to emotion beyond the plain facts. She sat down when she was done. I told my clerk to note it for review. Standard procedure. Then Dane stood up. He had been lying at my left knee, as he always was. He rose unhurried, the way he rose when he had decided something. Walked the length of the petition hall, and sat down beside her bench. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something unexpected has occurred and no one yet knows what it means. Lyra looked at Dane. She did not startle. She did not reach for him. She simply looked at him the way you look at something that makes sense, even if you cannot say why, and went back to waiting for the session to resume. I stared at my wolf for a long moment. Then I cleared my throat and called the next petitioner. By the 5th day, I had lost 6 more. Call, my senior scout's wolf, was the second to go. Then the 2 hall wolves, Bren and Fen. Then Asha, who belonged to my master of horses, and had never shown interest in anyone outside that relationship. Then 2 young wolves from the outer yard whose names I confess I had to ask. Tay and Moro, barely 2 years old, who had been following Lyra around since the 4th morning as though she were their personal son. Lyra, for her part, had made no effort to attract any of them. She came to the morning sessions. She asked her clerks questions. She had taken on a secondary role helping other petitioners organize their cases, a thing no one had asked her to do, and which she had simply begun doing because it was useful. In the afternoon, she was in the outer yard, where she had set up her dye vats beside the well. Continuing her trade work, filling orders, she said she owed to 3 villages down the river road. The wolves slept in the steam around her. The color hung in the air above them all, indigo and madder and a deep amber she called saffron root. And the wolves breathed it in and stayed. My steward, Brennan, said nothing for 4 days. On the 5th day, he came to my study with a report I had not asked for, set it on the desk, and left without comment. It was a tally of wolves and their current locations. Every entry read outer yard. I read it twice. Then I set it down. She is a cloth-dyer from no particular place, I said to the empty room. She has no pack, no land, no alliance value whatsoever. The room did not argue with me. Neither did Dane, because Dane was in the outer yard. On the 6th day, I went to the outer yard myself. I told myself I was inspecting the well repair. This was not true, and the well knew it, but it held its tongue. She was working when I came in, arms deep in the amber vat, turning cloth on a long wooden rod, not looking up. The wolves were arranged around the yard in various states of repose. Dane was sitting nearest to her, watching the cloth turn. He glanced at me when I came through the gate, with the particular expression he used, when he had been waiting for me to arrive at an obvious conclusion. Your wolf is very calm, Lyra said, without looking up. He is not usually, I said. I know. She pulled the cloth from the vat, checked the color against the morning light, seemed satisfied. He told me. I said, wolves don't speak. She looked at me then for the first time. She had a quality of stillness I had not often encountered, not the stillness of someone suppressing something, but the stillness of someone who had simply stopped needing to fill space with noise. No, she agreed, but they tell you things. I looked at Dane. Dane looked at the cloth. I said I would leave her to her work. She said she hoped the well inspection had gone well. I left the yard with a distinct sense that I had been handled with great gentleness by someone who had not been trying to handle me at all. That night, the warmth in my left wrist had moved up to my forearm. I did not mention this to anyone. On the 8th evening, Brennan knocked at my study door and said, with the careful neutrality of a man choosing his words like stepping stones across a cold river, "My lord, I believe you may wish to know that there are now no wolves anywhere in Thornwall except the outer yard." I set down my pen. None, my lord. Call counted. Twice, and Dane in the outer yard, my lord. He has taken up a position at the center of the circle. I am told he looks very settled. I looked at my left wrist. The warmth was visible now, not to most eyes perhaps, but I knew what a bond mark looked like in its early stages, and I knew what it meant when the mark had been building for 6 days, and the wolves of an entire kingdom had arranged themselves in a circle around the same woman. I knew what it meant. I had simply been waiting to see if I was wrong. Brennan was still in the doorway. He had the expression of a man who has been patient for 8 days and intends to remain patient indefinitely because he is professionally obligated to, but would also like credit for it at some point. Is she still here? I asked. She leaves tomorrow morning, my lord. Her orders are filled. She said she has a delivery to make in Aldfen by the week's end. I said nothing for a moment. Then, what is the condition of the boy in Eckfeld? Brennan blinked. I'm sorry? The child with the lung condition. The one she petitioned for on the 3rd morning. Oh. He straightened slightly. The boundary review was completed this afternoon, my lord. Eckfeld has been added to the registry. I was going to note it in tomorrow's summary. Tell her tonight, I said. If you can find her. He found her. He came back an hour later and said she had received the news quietly and thanked him and had asked him to thank me, and that was all. He paused. She also said to tell you that Dane seems like he has been very lonely. I sat with that for a while. Then I blew out the lamp and went to bed. And I did not sleep particularly well, and the warmth in my wrist did not cool at all. On the 9th morning, the last day of the petition season, I walked into the outer yard at dawn. I had told no one I was coming. I had not put on the formal coat. I was wearing what I wore when I walked the kingdom alone, which was sensible wool and a cloak I had owned for 11 years, and I had my left wrist bare because I wanted to see what happened when I walked through the gate. What happened was this. Every wolf in Thornwall was arranged in a circle in the yard, sitting upright, facing inward, and in the center of the circle was Lyra, crouching beside the last of the packed dye vats, checking the lashing on the lid. She looked up when the gate opened. The wolves did not move. They watched me cross the yard. Dane was at the inner edge of the circle, directly behind her, and when I reached them and stopped, he stood up and very deliberately stepped to one side. Lyra straightened. She was watching me with that quality of stillness, and in the early light, her face was serious and kind, and entirely unafraid. I held out my left hand. He looked at it. The mark was faint but visible, a silver thread running along the inside of my wrist, the way a fused match looks in the moment before it catches. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached out and steadied my arm with both hands, the way you steady a thing that is about to change, and the mark went gold. Both wrists. Both of us. The light that came off it was the color of her amber cloth, and Dane made a sound in his chest that I had not heard from him in 20 years. Something between a sigh and a greeting, and sat down. I was aware that Brennan had followed me into the yard. I was aware that the 2 young wolves, Tay and Morrow, were now leaning against Lyra's knees with considerable commitment. I was aware that there were perhaps 30 petitioners who had arrived early and were standing at the yard's entrance watching this with great attention. I said quietly for her, "The tradition of this court is that anyone may enter and anyone may leave. I want you to know that is still true. But I would like, very much, to ask you to stay." Lyra looked at the gold on her wrists. She looked at Dane, she looked at me. "The boy in Eckfeld," she said. "Will someone follow up to make sure the healer placement actually happens? Not just the paperwork. I will do it myself if you like." She considered this. Then she looked at the assembled yard, the wolves, the petitioners, Brennan standing very still with the expression of a man trying not to smile, and she looked back at me. All right, she said. The yard bowed. Not because I commanded it. Because that is what a yard full of wolves and people does when something destined finally arrives at the conclusion it has been approaching for 9 days. Dane leaned his whole gray weight against both of us, very satisfied, and closed his eyes. Lyra asked, that evening, what would happen to her dye orders if she stayed? I told her she could fill everyone. We had a well and a yard, and apparently no shortage of wolves willing to breathe color steam for hours on end. She said that was practical. I said I had always tried to be practical. She said Dane had told her something different about that, and smiled when I reminded her that wolves don't speak. But they tell you things. She was right about that. And what Dane had been telling me, for 9 mornings in a row, I simply had not been willing to say aloud until she touched my wrist, and the mark turned the color of saffron root, and the yard went quiet in the way that means everything has finally, at no great speed but with complete certainty, arrived where it was always going. I have been a better king since. Not because she told me how to be, she has never once told me how to rule, but because the kingdom looks different when you are no longer governing it alone. And the wolves sleep through the night now, and the light in the petition hall in the mornings is the color of amber, and the boy in Eckfeld as well.